Hey guys, Ben here with Oddly Armed, and today I have my first PCC disassembly video, this one being an FN PS90. So let's go ahead, jump into it, and see how this tiny little guy disassembles. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started here by popping out the magazine. So on the P90, we just need to pull back on these nubs, and then we can go ahead and pop that really interesting 50-round magazine out of the top of the rifle. At which point, disassembly becomes incredibly easy because there's just a single button right here in the top of the receiver. And if we actually go ahead and take off my tape switch first so this doesn't get weird, we can go ahead and press in that button and your entire upper receiver assembly comes off the rifle. Taking a look at our aluminum upper receiver, and I believe it's a cast aluminum. You can see the finish is a little bit rough as far as it's a pebbly texture there, but it is fairly well finished, all things considered. And being a submachine gun chambered in 5.7, it doesn't necessarily need to be some crazy material. But looking at that, we can see our barrel mounted in there. This is a CMMG barrel, and you can see it has a nice chrome lining in there. And then the interesting thing about the barrel is it's actually not fixed into the receiver itself, and it has a little bit of spring tension, and it can also move in there. That's supposedly supposed to help with the reliability of the system overall. Now, if we flip it over, we can see the recoil, or the charging handle spring there underneath, and that is wrapped around the barrel. So if you do a barrel swap on this with the PS90, this spring can be a massive pain, so I suggest using a dowel rod to hold that spring in there so it doesn't decompress. But you can see our charging handle just slides on this little carriage underneath, and there's really not a whole lot more to see on this receiver. We can see my ring sight up top here, and give you a little bit of a look in there so you can kind of see through it. It's a little difficult to do since there is sort of eye relief to this, but that's really all there is to the upper receiver. The next part of disassembly is extremely difficult. You need to just tilt it forward, and then your bolt as well as the recoil springs will come out the rifle. Looking at the bolt assembly, there's really nothing else that we need to do to disassemble this. This comes out as basically a single piece. You can disassemble it further if you really need to, if you want to get the springs out of there and its guide rods, but it's not really necessary, and you can just wipe this down, oil it, and it'll work perfectly fine for you. Now, looking at how this actually works, we do have the bolt riding on these two steel guide rods in there, and then we have the springs in the back. And then we have our firing pin in there, which is held in with a roll pin right there. It is spring loaded. And then that is the spring for the extractor. And taking a look at the bolt face, we can see the extractor down at the bottom there. And our ejector is a plunger style one right on top of the bolt face. And this again jacks straight down out the bottom of the rifle, which is pretty cool, very ambidextrous. Now this weight right here, the silver weight, is actually more important in the P90 because this is an anti-bounce lever. So when your bolt goes forward, it has a tendency, particularly in simple blowback guns like the P90, to bounce back a little bit, which can potentially in full auto guns give you a dead trigger, which is a good thing because it's better than a live trigger and then you have an out of battery. But what this does is essentially uses momentum and carries it through and acts as a dead blow hammer to keep that bolt forward and gives it like a second kind of hit as it's going into battery here, so it doesn't bounce back out of battery. That's really all we need to see for the bolt itself. Now moving back to the stock, the next step is taking out our trigger group, which is done by removing the butt plate here. So we just press this up and off the back of the rifle. So looking at this, there's a little knob on the end of the bolt carrier that actually fits in here and holds it onto the back of the rifle. And then we can see in there, down below is where our trigger group is. And this is actually a space for a little cleaning kit, which I don't have. Now to remove the trigger group, all you gotta do is get your finger underneath this little paddle here. You press up on it and then you pull back. And if I can do it awkwardly here, there we go. And it'll slide right out the back of the stock itself. Now looking at this, you can see it is almost entirely polymer except for the springs and the pins. But this is kind of a classic bullpup style of trigger group, very similar to what you'll see in the AUG, and then really, really similar to the FS2000. And then we can just see everything in here is made out of plastic. Now, taking a look at the stock itself, there's really nothing too crazy to see. We have our little safety disc down here at the bottom, as well as the linkages for the trigger, since of course this is a bullpup and the trigger pack is back here, so you have to link the trigger to that. And other than that, it's basically just two shells of polymer which are screwed together. So there's really not a whole lot that we're going to have to do back here. Now, one other thing is in the ejection port down here at the bottom of the rifle, there is a little ejection port cover. It won't lock closed because I have the trigger group out of there, but there is a little ledge right here which actually acts as your bolt hold open. You have to do it manually, but you do have the ability to lock the bolt back on this rifle. And there's a PS90 fully disassembled, and as you can see, it's incredibly simple with only 5 main components plus a magazine. So please like, share, subscribe, check out the full review on the PS90 as well as the other reviews I've done so far. And then I'm going to be having more content coming out here in the near future for you guys.